Welcome to the first podcast for 2026 of the ShiftNow panel, this time about whether or not the acceleration of adoption in AI is outspeeding DevOps capability to help keep things on the rails. And with us today is Travis McPeak of Cursor, Clayton of Codezero, and Ankur Chakraborty of Box. If you all could go ahead and give some quick introductions of yourselves and your interests in cyber, and we can go from there.
I'll go first. Hey, I'm Travis. I've been at Cursor for 7 months. Before this, I was running a company that was in the intersection of Sec and DevOps. So I really love this space and excited to talk today.
Excited to have you too. Reed.
Awesome. Clayton, CEO and co-founder of Codezero. We built a tool that essentially eliminates secrets from runtime and for developers, DevSecOps, and DevOps teams.
Excellent. Thank you. And Ankur.
Hi, I'm Senior Director of Platform Security over at Box. So we are responsible for securing all our applications that are built over here.
Small job, right?
Prior to that, I was lucky enough to doing device security over at Google.
Excellent. Thank you. We're so glad to have you all join us. So I'll go ahead and just throw out some some ideas first. We're seeing a lot of excitement as well as acceleration of adoption of AI in both the startup as well as the enterprise spaces. A lot of employees and a lot of big companies are being asked and looked at closely in terms of how they're adopting AI. And so I think that there's both the enthusiasm as well as just the structural push. What are some of the real measurable wins or possibly losses we're seeing in DevOps life cycles because of this? Does anyone want to take a first response on that? I'll direct it to Travis.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So I actually think this is a universally good thing for security and DevOps. So the new risk here is that we have surface areas that we haven't seen before. I would liken that to cloud, where both a combination of internal practices and tools caught up quickly. And I've never seen the startup ecosystem move as fast as it is right now to solve these problems. Right. And then aside from that, we have velocity of developers, which I think is a universally good thing for companies. It means that we have more work to do in security. And if we have to do that same work without new tools ourselves, then it would be bad. We would just have a harder time scaling ourselves. But we in security and also infrastructure teams can also heavily use AI tools, and I'm happy to talk more about what I do and see there. But I think it helps us scale way more than we ever could have if it was just people and existing tools.
I could see that. Do you see it as something we can measure, or is it something that we still have to just allow people to move forward and then count it up at some future date?
I think it's you can measure it for sure if you have tools and any kind of measure of good outcomes from those tools. Like, for example, we have security bug finders, and we can see how many security bugs they find and compare that to what we might have found with traditional tools like linters and other things. So there are quantitative measures that come out of it, but really like qualitatively, this morning I was troubleshooting something in AWS, and I used Agent, and just the speed at which it can dive in there and get things out of CloudWatch metrics. Like, you can just try it for yourself. And same thing if you ask an agent, like, go tell me how this big pile of code that I've never touched before is structured. It'll produce a very nice diagram, and you can ask questions about it. So any of those kind of qualitative improvements, you can just feel for yourself.
Excellent. Ankur, in terms of how Box is working with AI, both internally and with your customers, are you seeing changes in how people work?
I mean, we are already seeing that heavily in developers and engineers. We have probably one of the fastest velocity of software development that we have seen in our lifetimes. And
that's exciting. Yeah.
It's a wonderful world. But also, I'm on the optimistic side here that this is probably going to make security for the better. We have a lot of challenges. We have governance challenges. We have observability challenges. But probably after a very, very long time, we are in a space where we can start focusing a lot on security outcomes and not necessarily security activities. So a lot of times we have thought about, okay, finding bugs, doing design reviews, doing code reviews. We can now think of having actionable outcomes where we are measurably reducing risk, where we are measurably eliminating classes of weaknesses. And that capability is no longer restricted to if you're a large technology company, but if you have some level of engineering expertise, you can scale that more and more as you go through.
Do you see this happening as something that is happening right now in terms of those improvements to security, or something that's more down the road once some of the infrastructure gets built up?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
And probably I think I'd love to hear more from Reed and Travis on this, but kind of a 2-second thing is CVE remediation has been the bane of every software security team on the planet. And today, with being able to generate automated tests, having those things in the pipeline, that is a bugbear that we can probably kill very quickly as we're going through this. So I think we are still at the beginnings of this process, but there is a huge roadmap. There's a huge amount of potential where we are now no longer building security programs just for developers, but we are building these programs for agents who are generating code throughout the process.
In terms of the risks and the fears of security professionals around that, are there things that, to use the cliche, that keep us up at night extra, right, in terms of having to secure autonomous agents as well as the people?
We get the same risks now multiplied by 1,000. I mean, we have now basically, it's not an infinite downside risk, but the constraint on engineers on the number of agents that can spawn is pretty much just constrained by the amount of dollars you can spend on tokens.
Interesting. So it moves the bottleneck on that kind of...
In a very different direction. We still are, I think, and Cursor and Reed are on the front lines of these, but things about how do we observe actions, how do we observe processes, how do we consider identity, where a lot of these agents now share identity with the human place, but don't necessarily have the same constraints as a human all the time. And that kind of begins to change a lot of these games for us. And so it creates a lot of interesting opportunity, not just for security teams, but a lot of startups who are entering the ecosystem on how to build those products.
That's right. Reed, what is your take on people's sense that, oh, this is a green field for security development of tools, and what we're doing to secure AI?
I mean, I think what's really interesting over the last even few months, there's a lot of pressure on businesses to actually implement AI, but not just as a test case, but show real results. And I think what that's doing is it's proliferating that attack surface that we, Ankur and Travis just mentioned. I mean, in order for AI to be productive, agents need your APIs and databases. They need access to development environments. Third-party services need your internal systems, but traditional software forces you to choose and scatter secrets across all these external environments, and it just creates a sprawling attack surface that grows with every integration. Particularly on the agentic side, we're seeing a lot of enterprises and a lot of the companies that we deal with just really not have a sense on what to do because they don't want to trade off between security and productivity.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's always the classic trade-off that the security teams are pushing against. One of my engineers had once just said to me, look, there's no way I'm ever going to win that argument, because anything we want to put in place is going to be, even a microsecond transaction is going to create something that they have to deal with. And so there is that aspect of needing to be able to make the wins tangible, right? How do you make security and risk tangibly a win for everybody and worth that little bit of extra? And then, of course, the friction piece, right? The classic thing is most developers and engineers want to be moving at the fastest velocity possible, to be in flow, but also to, make those really rapid and big impacts in their development life. What do you see in terms of how that process can be helped? is that something that your organization is looking at?
It's something that we see a lot, and one of the biggest questions is, how do I enforce principle of least privilege? And part of that is, it's not just around security, it's around access, and it starts at the developer level, because you need to give developers access to pre-production environments that should be secure environments. And what we've been seeing is everybody is throwing Fort Knox at production, but they're forgetting that agents and developers need secure access to pre-production environments. So there's an interesting push-pull with that, but that's something that's very common. It's what we've been helping a lot of organizations out with.
Absolutely. It's almost like the production environments get all the visibility and kind of the glory and the dollars. And meanwhile, there's a massive soft spot behind it in terms of pre-production. And very often you have much looser kinds of restrictions around what kind of data is being brought in, what connections are happening, what the networks are accessing across the board. So it's always it's a very quick second question after where are the crown jewels? It's okay, what's going on in the development environments, and almost always you'll get some very very creative or mushy answers on it. So turning to Travis, what DevOps tasks should never be automated with AI? And any of you feel free to jump in if you agree, disagree, want to debate it.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, we like to talk about prompt injection and hallucination, and like those are absolutely real concerns. But at the same time, for as long as I've been in security, there's also been insider risk, and now we have people that come and work at your company that like you think are in location A and they're actually in location B around the world. So that's always been a concern in terms of somebody malicious in your organization, and now we can have with prompt injection a malicious agent. And then also the just kind of like least privilege aspect, like we've never gotten right in industry. This probably adds more fuel to that fire. So I think it's not an either or. Like the way I use an agent for like highly privileged action is I say we need to debug this thing in AWS, and I'm running as administrator, and I approve every single command it takes, and it will generate those commands so that I can read it in a second. It would take me 15 minutes to write if I was like an AWS guru. And so it's not binary, like either agent does everything or it does nothing. Like it does a whole bunch of the work, and then I review and approve every single one before it executes. So I think that's a really good model for having it take privilege action. Like it can still be a massive force multiplier without just saying like, yep, you're admin now, like do things.
Right, exactly. It's not a hands off the wheel sort of exercise, right? You get the amplification. A entrepreneur in marketing events also said something similar to me, that they were using it to create a lot of like agents to reduce the scale of work of organizing things. But before any email went out, she always would view each one because she said, my name is on that, so I'm going to make sure that it's correct.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's the same way I write code too. I hear about people, that vibe code and like they just write a bunch of stuff and they never look at it and they merge it to prod. But for me, if my name's on it in GitHub, like I'm responsible for that. If it breaks, I'm going to come and fix it. Like I'm going to be, paged in the middle of the night if it's bad. So I review all of that stuff. And with me working together with an agent where I'll say, this is what we're trying to do. It comes up with a plan. I scrutinize the plan. I ask about options. It proves itself to me by showing me doc snippets. And then we come up and execute that. I'll review it, give it feedback, and then we ship that. Like it's both one, way faster, and two, like every single time I do this, like I learn new stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's a chance to kind of speed track your learning cycles on things that are really relevant and deep, right? If you stay connected. You bring up a really interesting point about ownership and responsibility. A lot of this comes back to, still staying connected with that sense of what you're putting out in the world and what that means. I think that there's a really interesting development or question on this. How does that play out as people are developing agents or agents developing agents, and that ownership tie starts to get weaker? And opening up development responsibilities beyond the classic development engineering cohort, right? It's now spread out to, technical support, but also people who traditionally are doing other aspects of the org and other completely different functions. Ankur, what are you all seeing in terms of how people stay connected or don't with that ownership piece on what their work is in AI?
So I think I read an interesting blog by Daniel Missler on this, where he mentioned that there are things that you automate, there are things that you don't. You don't automate going to the gym, which I found
That's a good
fairly
analogy.
yeah. So more and more the things that require you to consistently do in order to exercise judgment, so that you own the, as Travis mentioned, even when the agents are doing something, we learn something. And actually, to that point on what should never be automated, I think the judgment piece is the question that we want agents to think of options. You want them to come up with different ways to do things. But the judgment, security judgment aspect, I think still needs to have that human in the loop. So it's not that you don't let them come up with the options at all. We look to it for generating various options. And we are reaching a point where some of them can do that better than 90% of the population in a lot of these cases. But still relying on that, because even as I mentioned, identity, the agents are still adopting our identities. So whether you have it pushed by the agent or you are pushing it, it's your name on it.
Your name is there.
Your name is on it.
Actually, something you said is really interesting and important. So I think that we are all moving to a model where we're looking less and less at code, but we still have to realize that these are probabilistic. And by the way, humans are probabilistic too, right? Like there's a standard defect rate of humans writing code. So I think where we're going to move to, if we're not like hands-on code and reviewing it, is making models prove themselves to other independent models. So it's all done and correct when some other model like judges these security properties are met and like proves them with test cases. And it's verifiably like reliable when these properties exist, and it can prove that with whatever code snippets or test cases or whatever. I think we're going to move more into that land, but there's still going to be that sort of like business owner judgment of this is what we need to hit and prove. And like, it's the agent's job to show me that that's been done.
To Travis' point, it's also that how we think about skills is kind of going to develop more and more as we go forward. We are not going to rely on being just extremely high quality code. As Travis mentioned, like AWS guru could put something together in 15 seconds, but even if you're not, the agent will do it in less time for you. So some of the shift towards system thinking versus, which ironically, we train our security engineers a lot in, is like in systems. But even if you're not good at coding, so that's why for me, this is a good time to be in security, because coding is was never a barrier. It's now even less of a barrier. But you do need to be able to understand how the systems work. And judgment and context engineering, over and above understanding how prompts work and how agents consume prompts, to what we talked about, like security judgment and context. How do you understand that? How do you skill up for that? We have, again, spent a lot of time doing that in jobs. But again, like Travis, Reed, you have done this for a very long time. So love to hear more like how you think about like some of the skill shifting that's going on.
I think you touched on it, Ankur, and you, Travis, as well. And I think the double click is look, there needs to be humans in the loop at the end of the day. But if we look at, the top two OWASP, agentic problems are broken access control and security misconfiguration. And so I think part of that is making sure that there are humans in the loop to manage those processes and eliminate more credential sprawl as you bring in more agents that are accessing different components of your infrastructure without having to rebuild the infrastructure every time. And I think that's going to require a human gatekeeper in many different components, making sure that access is provisioned properly. That's not to say that maybe in the future, as we get better with machine-to-machine verification, there can't be more of that. But I think until we have the proper processes in place, I think there's always going to need to be humans in the loop.
I have an anecdote about that. So I have been approving every single command ever since I started at Cursor, and I'm probably one of the only ones that does that. It's really annoying. I do it because I have privileged access on systems. So like my GitHub user is an admin, and if the agent does something bad, it's like really bad, and I will feel bad about that, and I don't want to. So I've been approving it, and I'm curious about options. So for example, can another model judge like a terminal command and decide what actually of this like very unparsable like bash string, like what is it calling? And what I've found is that like the quick models of today's generation, one, are very fast, and two, like better than any human. Like I can look at, I generated adversarial test cases for this. It can put some giant bash string in front of me, and I have like no idea like what commands or arguments are being run. And these models get it with like very, very, very high rate. So I think that if we start to layer on, like a 0.0001% error rate, times the base error rate of a model, and maybe with another model as a judge, we start to get like significantly better than humans. And then we're going to deal with what we have in self-driving cars, where like those things already drive better than we do. But the psychological impact of a autonomous machine making a mistake for some reason is like bigger, even if it happens less than people making mistakes.
So actually, if my cursor builder breaks, I know that I have to blame Travis for it because he's the one.
Definitely, just go straight to him.
But actually, on the autonomous vehicles analogy, like there has been a metric that's been tracked very closely there, which has been the disengagement rate, right? So how many disengagements of the, like, when did the driver have to put their hands on the wheel for every 1,000 miles, and often that becomes so what Travis is talking about is kind of like how many times does the human have to reject a command, because all the layers of like control, like small models and others and other deterministic and probabilistic pieces didn't work out. So we might have a new metric to track here, which doesn't necessarily serve perverse incentives.
Right.
I mean, security metrics, we have struggled because there have been very few things in our control. So we track the things not necessarily that needed to be tracked, but we track the things that could be tracked and try to do some level of mapping.
Lower hanging fruit, things that were easier to track.
Exactly.
And also tracking that over time is like hugely, it's very interesting. And I think that if we actually had numbers for that, we would see the model improvement too. So like I said, I've been doing this for 7 months. So at least 3 or 4 generations of cutting edge models. And my enter is good, escape is bad. So like my enter, escape, the number of escapes has gone way down. And I found that usually when I do it, it's not because like the model's completely wrong. It's because like it just didn't understand like what we're doing, or it's about to go waste time on something. But I approve every single one of them. And there have been cases where it's like, fine, fine, fine. Like, no, don't do that. Like, what are you doing here? Like all of those cases where like models want to help you and will go out of their way to help you, even if it means like let's just delete everything in prod and like recreate it new and fresh. Like they will do that stuff sometimes. So I think it's getting much better. And like my personal observation without hard numbers is the number of times where I press escape has dropped way down, which means that my attention also, like anybody's attention, if you press enter 10,000 times in a row, like you're just going to be trained to press enter. And then the one time that you actually like wanted to stop it, like you're not going to press escape. So I think that's where models with like perfect attention are actually, or maybe like working with humans, like either of them can decide not to run something, will actually outperform like any individual human.
That's really interesting. I was going to say, Kent, I wonder if there's a way that we can track that where we prevent excessive agency, because that's of course, being challenging. I'm just going to drop this table in production or this database and eventually rebuild it. But as you're doing that, there are long tail effects to the development of whatever you're working on that have that. So I think that's really interesting. I'd be curious to get a sense on what those stats continue to look like.
So I'll actually push back on that a little bit. I would say that, yes, dropping the tables, really bad. Deleting a whole EC, VPC, really, really bad. But probably we need to, I think, drive towards some level of infrastructure maturity, where we want to enable a lot of autonomy. But in order to enable that, we need some level of resilience, actually very high degree of resilience in the infrastructure, that it can actually survive hallucinated action that actually does those things. So yeah, you went ahead and deleted a database, you knocked out a service instance, but if we have the resilience that restoring that is a sub-millisecond, I'm being very optimistic, but a sub-millisecond operation, or restoring a service becomes a matter of seconds, then I think we can actually absorb those mistakes. And probably that's the direction I would really, from a security standpoint, think of. Like, I mean, Phil has kind of talked a lot about resilience in a lot of his original posts, but now resilience becomes a very critical security function, because if we are resilient, we can absorb things that go wrong like that.
I love that example. So let's say we want models to be able to make changes and test things out. And so we have a test environment that replicates prod. Models can change that at will. We send over some tiny portion of traffic and make sure it's good. And then if nothing breaks, we automatically sync over the test configuration to prod. Like that kind of stuff would enable the kind of autonomy with like a buffer window of observing that things have gone wrong.
And then I think it's using a good staging to production DevOps kind of practice in terms of having those different test beds or quarantine cases and being able to flip over active, passive, and that kind of thing. So I think that's a pretty good example. What you guys were all talking about here in terms of the level of involvement of the human, it got me thinking also about what is the optimal amount of having the human in the loop, right? We're usually, as engineers, trained to think about reducing the amount of human input needed to achieve a perfect standard. But is there a place at which the humans start to just zone out or go to sleep, right? Like I think about sometimes, some of our applications like Signal will ask you periodically to re-enter your password just so that you don't forget it, right? Every once in a while. So is there a place that we should be thinking about how the humans and AI are interacting in a way, not just to optimize the AI models, but also to optimize it, humans still keeping attention on it?
Yeah, I love that point. So it's like I did this talk a while ago, and it was like if you've ever been in a hospital and like those like scans, they just go off all the time. And then
Yes.
if you've ever seen somebody run in and like just press the mute button, like that happens so
Right.
much that they stop paying attention to it. So like that alarm is completely pointless. And I think we've all seen this in detection land where it's like,
A lot.
yeah, we just say like, hey, mute that channel or whatever. Like we don't look at it because the signal and noise is wrong. So I
It's
think,
broken.
yeah, exactly. I think what really good is going to look like here is getting automatically those kinds of signals where it's like, okay, if we fast forward in the future, 3 years and we have these like really good models, it's like I'm not going to read 300,000 lines of code, but like these are the 10 points, where actually like really important stuff's happening that I care about. Like maybe it's
Right.
authorization decisions or whatever. And like those I'm going to heavily scrutinize. And models are really good even today at picking out those level of like, where's the authorization happen? Like it'll show you exactly. So I think we're going to get much more to that where it's like humans get their attention on the right things. And then
Right.
where it's not like, okay, go ahead and like read all this code that like nobody can read.
Right. It's just
And to,
burning up time.
and to Travis's point, like I think we have kind of started rethinking software engineering all over again. Like we have seen,
Uh,
like if you look at it, like we're thinking about test plans. Like yeah, test plans sounds great. So we are thinking about test-driven development in software engineering, which we talked about 10, 12 years ago. We moved to
or more.
behavioral-driven development, and probably then what does that? So we have some variation of that coming in. So yeah, I think we are already reading a lot less code than we expected to. We are also generating a lot more code than we expected to. So we are, I think, reaching that inflection point already, but we probably need more ways to be able to have more deterministic things. So for example, authorization checks, sure. I need better test cases to check that whether my authentication and authorization works well. This is we probably need to invest more time there because we've always tried to do well, but we never really hit that because that's why we have so many authorization and broken access control errors.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, if there's a startup who wants to work with that, please talk to me. I would love somebody's thinking about solving that problem.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like part of what ends up happening is as we develop new tools, new tool genres and products, is the complexity level just keeps going up because we make new categories, new things that need to be tuned and so forth. Reed, in terms of ways of rethinking this challenge, especially in terms of borrowing concepts from the old, one of the things I loved about your product is it made me think of the simplicity of an SSH session section that you use to just encrypt your entire process. Have you believe that you can take a different look at that complexity swamp that we have?
I think so, and part of it is just acknowledging that the processes that Travis and Ankur are talking about today, traditional tool sets that we had, aren't going to be able to solve a lot of these problems, and especially looking at the acceleration curve of where everything's headed with AI and agentic. We look at it like go back to the very simple challenges of what are you trying to solve for, and we look at it very holistically and say, look, you've probably got long-lived static API keys stored in environment variables. Those are probably susceptible to credential sprawl. How can we ensure that all of the developers, whether they're, a non-human identity or a human identity, can have, very secure access to whatever they need to do without ever handling credentials. And then that way, you can prevent things happening downstream, like an agent put a credential in system memory, or something ended up happening as you expand your attack surface. So we look at it pretty holistically, but we treat developers and agents just as identities.
Make me make good choices, whatever it is that's coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah, I mean, good developer hygiene, right? Just
Right.
to start off with.
That's right. Whoever or whatever you are, this is how we're going to do things, right? In terms of the ways that the DevOps skill set is changing and how people are adapting to what's there, what do you all see in terms of, there's places where engineers and people in that pipeline need to double click on things and maybe do a little bit more of what they're already doing in order to transition? Or where do you see things that can just be kind of leapfrogged over and say, okay, you know what, we're done with that now. AI is going to handle that, or the level of automation that we have is going to handle that. You can now switch your attention.
I could take a crack at it. So yeah, I'd say 60% security and 40% infra here. And just the rate at which I can do both, like ramp into some new system that I might be unfamiliar with the exact syntax and like ramp up on docs, is extremely rapid. So I went through and hardened a whole bunch of our systems, and like many of them I've never touched before. And just agent has understood enough of these docs, or like can go find the docs, where I move through quite quickly. And even, like I said earlier, like the troubleshooting example, it's just so fast. I think that in the same way that we have security tools that can go and find issues proactively and do better reviews, I think that anything that you can get in text form in front of a model is going to do really well. So like our infrastructure as code, for example, which is like, the very like DevOps infra heavy,
Right.
that whole part like benefits a lot, and people can use agent to take the infrastructure that they would have wanted and produce infrastructure as code from it without having to learn all the Terraform or whatever syntax. I think there's just like a ton of benefits in it. On the other hand, what that's going to do, like what we've done is like remove the barrier to entry, right? So like
Right.
previously somebody would have said, whatever, I'm not going to touch infrastructure. I'm going to ask the infrastructure team because it's going to take me 5 days to like figure out like how AWS and Terraform work. And now you just like, I want a blah in agent and it'll go spin one out. So since the barrier to entry is lowered on that kind of work and development, we need to be aware that like some of the people that we're serving as like a service team are going to be like less familiar with what they're asking for. And we also need to realize that it's a hybrid of what they asked for and what agent decided to do. So there's like more scrutiny on it, not from like a we're here to block you standpoint, but just from a like let's make sure that this is actually sane. But I think, like I said, the agents are also quite good at identifying these types of issues.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point, especially in terms of the agents and the users trying to intuit each other's meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I am not 100% sure like what skills and that will need to be developed over the next 6 to 12 months.
That's an honest answer.
It's one thing I think, however, has been clear is that a lot of the things that are considered technical art is often where somebody can get the edge or the moat in.
Yes.
So you might be able to write a lot of code very quickly, but the particular having gone through the ringer of having to build particular architectures, having that learning, often I think will start to become more and more of a moat. I don't know for how long, but in the short term, domain expertise is going to help, but domain expertise by itself does not keep you on the bleeding edge. You will need to be able to pair that. You'll need to be able to build good teams and actually be just nice to the people you work with, because you probably need their expertise to get things done.
Just to piggyback that on that super fast, and then I want to hear what Reed has to say also. But I think the skills that are emphasized now are kind of that scrutiny, which actually security people get naturally. It's like, I don't trust you, like prove it to me. That's really good for agents that just get confused. It might not even be confused. It might have just been like we as humans did not communicate precisely in English and it's guessing. So that's one. And then I think like product-minded people where, anybody where it's like my job is to write code, like they're going to suffer But if your job instead is to
Yeah.
go solve problems for the business and you use like any and all tools to make that goal happen, I think you're going to do really well for a long time.
That's a really interesting point, Travis. I think Phil touched on it when he talked about technical empathy, and I think if I could
Yeah.
say anything, what I've been seeing when I've been speaking with DevOps and DevSecOps is that they're open to new processes if it helps move the needle, and they're looking at it through the lens of how can I eliminate a lot of the friction that's typical between security and development. So I think, touching on that technical empathy piece, I think a lot of the folks are looking at it through the right lens. Is everybody wants to be productive, they just want to stay secure while doing it.
That's right. Yeah, just being able to kind of transcend those limits. It really calls to mind bringing all the skills to bear into your roles and your problems. It's a good point in terms of like what is it that AI needs in terms of being able to be tuned well and steered correctly, and it does require that technical empathy and attention and the understanding of the bigger picture that maybe the AI agents haven't yet cohered. So I wanted to, if you wanted to impart any kind of hope for what AI tooling will do for DevOps uh, and a better picture of least privilege, what would you like to leave with our guests, our audience today?
I mean, if we're
You know,
talking, go ahead. Oh yeah, go for it. You first.
please, after you.
If we're talking least privilege, like this is a strict gift. Like nobody ever got that stuff right. If you go ask
Yeah.
an agent to like generate IAM policy, like it's going to do it better than 99.9%. It does it better than me. I spent like many years like having to write IAM policies and like it gets it right. And you can also do a validation loop and like make sure that it works with a much lower barrier to entry. I would say this is like a really good time for DevOps because they've always like spanned many systems and like areas of the product.
True.
So they're in a really good position to just say like, great, we do that, but we do it like much faster and like we can ramp in and ramp out of areas like very quickly. Same with security. I think it's going to be a pretty universally positive thing, and I think DevOps security are going to be like huge beneficiaries of it.
I was going to say, very much aligned with your thoughts, Travis. I actually don't think the problem is access itself. I actually think the problem today is that every solution you end up using makes you choose between moving fast and staying secure. And my
Yeah.
hope is that a lot of the solutions that we're going to see coming out over the next little while are going to eliminate that, so organizations don't have to choose. They can still have the velocity, but remain incredibly secure as we ramp up, agents and AI across the ecosystem.
That's right. Breaking that false choice. Yep.
And actually, just to layer on Reed's point, earlier we have all the conversation has always been, if my privilege is too little, I can't operate at speed. At this point, with the capabilities that we have, least privilege is no longer an option, it's a requirement. And you have the ability to exhaust your privilege before you actually ask for the next level. And we are at a stage that we can start building those capabilities thanks to the great work that companies like Reed are doing. So.
I love that picture of being able to use the AI to exhaust your privilege before you go to the next level. It's a good model. So thank you so much, Ankur and Reed and Travis. This has been a really interesting and great conversation. I've learned a lot from it too. So I hope you all join us again sometime, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Julie.